"I don't love her, I just need her," said the Marquis, unaware she listened behind the door. "Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from." The chandeliers trembled with the heat of hundreds of candles, and the marble floors of Château de Villeneuve reflected the shimmer of silk and jewels. Music poured from the ballroom like golden smoke. Laughter swirled among powdered wigs, masks, and whispers. The night belonged to illusion, perfectly rehearsed illusion, and Élise had learned to move among it like a shadow. She stood near the great staircase, holding a tray of crystal flutes. Her dress was a borrowed miracle, soft silk, pale as morning frost. The Marchioness herself had ordered that the young companion appear presentable for the masquerade. It was the first time Élise had worn something that did not smell of starch and labor. For one brief evening, she allowed herself to pretend she belonged there. She searched the room for him. The Marquis Armand de l'Évêque. He was impossible to miss. Tall, severe, perfectly dressed in deep blue velvet. Even masked, he carried himself with that calm arrogance of men who believe the world bends for their convenience. Yet when his gaze found her, something softer always passed through it, a fleeting warmth that Élise had mistaken for affection. He had promised her many things in the garden 2 nights before, promised to free her from her life of servitude, to speak to his peers, to defy the conventions that separated them. His words had felt sincere beneath the moonlight, and when he took her hand, she had believed. "Do not fear the world, ma chère Élise," he had whispered then. "I will take the blows of it for you." Now, among the masks and fanfares, she clung to those words. A pair of noblemen passed, laughing about debts and politics. One of them nodded toward the Marquis. "He plays well tonight. The Comtesse de Mirval will not resist." Élise turned her face away, her heart stuttering. The Comtesse, beautiful, wealthy, widowed, was the subject of every whispered scheme. The Marquis had spoken of her once with polite disdain. "A woman who believes her coin buys admiration," he had said, but men often said things for effect. When the orchestra paused, Élise slipped toward the side corridor, seeking a breath away from the perfume and chatter. The air there was cooler, the light dimmer. She pressed her palm to her chest, steadying the restless beat beneath her ribs. Somewhere in the distance, Armand's voice rose in conversation, smooth and confident. She hesitated. She knew the tone he used when speaking with others, strategic, detached. Yet the sound of her name carried through the door ahead. "Élise?" a male voice repeated with a chuckle. "Surely not that girl." "She serves a purpose," Armand replied. The words froze her. She leaned closer, heart pounding. "What purpose could that be?" the other man asked, amused. Armand's answer came sharp and unhesitating. "I do not love her. I just need her." Silence followed. Then laughter, low, indulgent, cruel. Élise felt the corridor tilt. Her hand gripped the wall to keep from falling. The lace at her wrist trembled. "She believes otherwise, perhaps," the companion teased. "Belief is useful," Armand said. "A woman who imagines affection is easily guided. Her name softens my image. The court values sentiment in a man who deals with estates." The voices blurred after that. Élise heard only fragments, about marriage alliances, about property, about favor at Versailles. Each word chipped at the fragile shape of her world. The air felt suddenly heavy, perfumed with deceit. She could not breathe. Her mind raced back to every promise, every tender look, every moment when he had lowered his voice to say her name. Lies. All of it. From behind the door came the scrape of a chair and the sound of glasses clinking. The conversation shifted to laughter about politics. Élise stepped backward, barely aware that she was moving. Her slippers made no sound on the marble floor. Down the hall, the orchestra began another minuet. The melody sounded strange, mocking. She wanted to run but forced herself to walk, chin high until she reached the nearest alcove. Only there did her breath break free. He had lied. The Marquis had lied, and she had built her dreams upon that lie. The world blurred before her eyes. She pressed her handkerchief to her mouth to keep from sobbing. The masquerade continued without pause, the laughter and music drowning her quiet collapse. Somewhere behind her, a pair of ladies in peacock feathers gossiped about the Comtesse's emerald necklace. Life went on, It always did. Élise straightened slowly. She would not weep where others could see. Pride was the last possession no one could steal from her. She returned to the ballroom, mask in place, every step deliberate. The lights dazzled her eyes. She caught sight of Armand again, now speaking with the Comtesse, her fan fluttering, his hand resting lightly on his sword hilt, a gesture of gallantry he had once used with Élise. He saw her briefly across the room. His expression did not change. He smiled at the Comtesse instead. The pain was so sharp it steadied her. When the waltz ended, Élise slipped away to the gallery above the ballroom. From there, she could see the crowd without being seen. The music rose again, and she watched the Marquis dance. He moved perfectly, as if born for performance. A servant approached, offering wine. She shook her head. The mask hid her tears, but her voice betrayed her. "Leave me," she murmured, and the servant bowed, vanishing among the columns. She stared down until the candles blurred into circles of light. What had he meant? He needed her. Needed her for what? Then the memory struck. A week earlier, he had spoken of a pending claim in the royal treasury, an inheritance tied to an obscure name, St. Clair. He had asked casually about her father, whether he had ever served under that name. She had thought it a lover's curiosity. Perhaps it had not been. The puzzle formed in fragments she could not yet assemble. The night dragged on, endless. Guests drifted to the gaming tables, the air heavy with perfume and fatigue. Élise remained in the gallery until the final notes faded and the dancers began to leave. She descended the stairs quietly, her shoes whispering against the marble. The great hall was nearly empty. A few servants gathered cloaks and extinguished candles. The Marquis was nowhere in sight. She passed through the vestibule toward her quarters, the borrowed gown heavy around her. At the door of the antechamber, a faint glimmer caught her eye, something lying on the floor. It was a folded letter sealed with the Marquis's crest. She hesitated, glancing around. The corridor was silent. She knelt and picked it up. Her name was written across it in a hand she recognized too well. Her pulse quickened. For an instant she wondered if it might contain some explanation, some trace of the tenderness she had believed in. But the memory of his voice behind the door returned, cold, certain, merciless. She pressed the letter to her chest, then hid it within her gown. Down the corridor, a door opened. Voices approached. She fled into the side passage, heart hammering. She reached her small chamber under the eaves and locked the door. The candles there were almost burned out. The room smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She leaned against the wall, clutching the letter. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a single page, the ink slightly smudged. The words were brief, formal, addressed to a man in Paris. It spoke of an inheritance, a claim pending from the estate of Jacques St. Clair, and of a young woman of no rank, whose identity must remain concealed until the matter was settled. The breath left her lungs. Jacques St. Clair, her father's name. She sank onto the edge of her narrow bed, reading again and again. Each line confirmed it. The Marquis had known from the beginning who she was. He had spoken of love not to raise her, but to control her. She was the key to property, influence, wealth. He had courted her only to secure a legal claim. A shiver ran through her, part fury, part disbelief. The paper crumpled in her hand. How carefully he had played his role, the gentle glances, the secret meetings, the whispered promises, all of it rehearsed. A log cracked in the hearth, scattering sparks. She rose and fed the letter to the flame. The paper curled, blackened, vanished. When the last ash fell, she turned to the mirror. The woman reflected there was pale, her eyes bright with something new. Not despair, resolve. "He needed me," she whispered. "Very well. Let him learn what that need costs." The next morning, sunlight flooded the chateau, indifferent to human ruin. Servants hurried through corridors, preparing for the departure of guests. Élise worked among them, calm, silent, unseen. In the courtyard, carriages rattled on the gravel. The Comtesse's laughter floated above the noise, bright as polished glass. Armand himself stood at the entrance, every gesture graceful, every smile practiced. No trace of last night's deceit marked his face. When he noticed Élise approaching with a tray, his expression flickered for an instant. Surprise, perhaps unease. but she gave no sign of recognition. She bowed and passed by, her movements measured. The entire morning unfolded as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. At noon, when the last guest had gone, Élise walked through the quiet halls. Her steps echoed against marble and mirrors. The air smelled of extinguished candles and wilted roses. She paused before the door where she had overheard him. It stood slightly ajar now. Within, papers and half-empty glasses littered a table. She could almost hear his voice again. "I do not love her, I just need her." The memory no longer tore her. It steadied her purpose. She crossed to the desk, glancing toward the hallway. The room was empty. On the table lay several letters, their seals unbroken. One bore the same crest as the one she had burned. Another carried the royal emblem. Her eyes lingered on them only a moment before she turned away. This was not the time. She would learn the truth first. Quietly, without haste. As she stepped back into the corridor, she caught sight of a reflection in the tall mirror. Herself small but unbowed, framed by the grand hallway of the chateau. The image made her pause. She did not belong here, yet she would not leave. Not yet. She heard footsteps behind her, firm, familiar. Armand approached, speaking to a steward. His tone was brisk, issuing orders about accounts, guests, and the upcoming visit of the Comtesse. When he saw her, he stopped. "Élise," he said, softer now. "For you are still here." She curtsied lightly. "You did not dismiss me, my lord." His eyes narrowed, searching her face. "You seem changed." "Do I?" she asked, her voice calm. He hesitated, uncertain. "I hope you enjoyed the masquerade." It was most instructive. Something in her tone unsettled him. "You sound as if you reproach me." "I would never presume." Before he could answer, the steward returned with a stack of documents, and Armand turned away. Élise moved past him, the faintest trace of a smile touching her lips. That evening she entered the small chapel beside the gardens. It was nearly dark, the stained glass dim with twilight. She knelt for a moment, not in prayer, but in thought. Somewhere within these walls lay the power to destroy him, or to free herself. She would decide which, in time. A sudden noise echoed from the corridor. She rose quickly and slipped into the shadows. The Marquis passed by, unaware she watched him. He carried a packet of letters under his arm, one marked with the same seal as before. He entered the library and closed the door behind him. Élise waited until the sound of his footsteps faded. Then she stepped into the light, her pulse steady. Whatever game he had begun, she would finish. She turned toward the window, the garden beyond silver with moonlight. Her reflection in the glass looked almost like another woman, cool, composed, unfamiliar. In the silence, a thought took root. Perhaps he would never know how much she had heard. Perhaps she could use that ignorance to her advantage. But fate rarely allows the luxury of secrets kept too long. As she left the chapel, her skirt brushed against something on the floor, a folded paper half hidden beneath the doorframe. She stooped to pick it up. It bore the Marquis's seal once more. Her name was written across it. Her heart stopped. She hesitated only a second before tucking it into her sleeve. In the distance, the clock struck midnight. The chateau slept, unaware that its quiet corridors had just witnessed the birth of a reckoning that would touch every life within its walls. In the faint candlelight of her chamber, Élise unsealed the letter and read the first line, her eyes widening in disbelief. The letter trembled in Élise's hands. The ink had faded slightly, but the words remained sharp, written in a firm hand, not her own. "To the Marquis Armand de l'Évêque," it began, "regarding the matter of Jacques Sinclair and the transfer of the Sinclair holdings." Her eyes moved quickly, breath catching as she read. It spoke of restitution, of a claim pending, and of a signature required from the rightful heir, known to reside under your protection. There was no name written, only those chilling words. The rightful heir. Her pulse hammered. Her father's name, her father's estate, her father's ruin, all tied to the Marquis who had used her trust as his key. She folded the letter, heart pounding. He had not merely deceived her for amusement. He had calculated every smile, every whisper, every touch to secure his own fortune. The realization hardened something within her that would never soften again. A knock startled her. "Élise." It was Lucienne, one of the older maids. "Are you unwell?" Élise slipped the letter beneath her pillow. "A headache, the music was loud." Lucienne nodded sympathetically. These noble knights make too much noise for simple hearts. Rest, child. When she left, Élise sat motionless. The candle flickered low, the wax pooling in silence. She whispered to herself, "He used my father's name. My name." The words steadied her. She would not leave the chateau. Not yet. Truth had its own timing. The next morning began as always. Bells ringing, servants bustling, orders given. Élise joined the household staff in the breakfast salon, arranging cups and napkins as the Marquis and his guests took their seats. The Comtesse de Mirval sat beside him, her laughter sharp as crystal. "Armand," the Comtesse said, "I am told you plan a gathering next week in honor of the royal inspector. How clever. You will make your case for those St. Clair lands at last." Élise froze. The St. Clair lands. There it was again. The Marquis smiled thinly. "A mere formality, dear lady, a matter of paperwork." The Comtesse leaned closer, teasing. "And of lineage, I imagine. You men of ambition always have need of some suitable figure to soften the royal clerks." He chuckled. "One must use what one has." The servants laughed politely. Élise kept her eyes down, her hands steady, though the blood drained from her face. When the meal ended, she collected the cups and left the room without a word. Outside, the hall was empty. She leaned against the wall, breathless. He would use her name in that hearing, pretend she was under his guardianship, and thus claim the inheritance for himself. Every tender word he had spoken had been an investment. By afternoon, gossip spread like perfume through the chateau. The Comtesse's carriage had been seen arriving twice in 1 week. Everyone knew what that meant. The Marquis was seeking marriage, wealth for debt, influence for decay. Élise's humiliation became silent entertainment for others. Lucienne found her in the corridor. "You must be careful, child. The Marquis's new guest asks questions about you." "What questions?" "Who you are, why you remain here, whether the rumors of his former affection were true." Élise smiled faintly. "Let her ask, I have nothing to fear." But she had everything to lose and more to discover. That night she returned to her chamber and pulled the burned remains of the first letter from the hearth. There was little left but a few corners of parchment and the faint trace of a seal. It would serve as proof enough that she had not imagined it. She took the second letter, the one she had read the night before, and hid it within the hollow of a wooden beam near her window. The Marquis would not find it there. Days passed. The household prepared for the inspector's visit. Tailors came and went. Footmen polished every handle. Cooks tested new dishes. The Comtesse appeared often, walking arm in arm with the Marquis through the gardens. Her jewels caught the light. Her laughter followed them like a bell. Élise served them tea once. "You pour beautifully," the Comtesse said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "The Marquis has good taste in his companions." "I am no companion, madame," Élise answered softly. The Comtesse tilted her head. "No? That is not what people say." Armand intervened, his tone too light. "People say too much. Élise is merely a kindness." A kindness. The word struck harder than cruelty. When the Comtesse left the room, Élise turned to him. "You speak as though I am a favor, my lord. Do you not tire of charity?" He frowned. "You misunderstand. It would be best if you avoided conversation with my guests. The Comtesse is your salvation," she interrupted. His eyes flashed. "You forget your place. And you forget your honor." He stepped closer. "Do not provoke me, Élise." "I no longer could, even if I tried," she said quietly. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned away. "Leave me." She did, but her heart did not tremble as it once would have. Each insult became a stone in the wall she was building inside herself. That evening, she walked through the library, drawn by the scent of old parchment. The candles burned low. On the desk lay a pile of letters, sealed and waiting to be sent. One bore her father's name again, St. Clair, written in a different hand. She hesitated only a moment before slipping it beneath her shawl. In her room, she broke the seal. It was addressed to Monsieur Duret, a name she dimly remembered from childhood. Her father's associate, perhaps. The letter spoke of property rights and missing documents. It mentioned that the true heir was a young woman residing under the Marquis's supervision. The truth spread before her like a map. Armand had planned to use her identity to legitimize his claim. He would sign in her name, collect the wealth, and dismiss her quietly. The next morning, Élise sought Lucienne. "Do you remember my father?" "Your father?" The woman looked surprised. "You were a child when you came." "He died poor, did he not?" "That is what they said." Lucienne frowned. "He once worked for the Marquis's father. There was some dispute about lands, but I never understood it." "Would you know where I might find a man named Duret?" Lucienne shook her head. "Paris, perhaps. He visited once long ago." Élise nodded slowly. "Thank you." That afternoon, while the household attended to preparations, Élise wrote a letter of her own. Her handwriting trembled, but her message was clear. "Monsieur Duret, I am the daughter of Jacques Sinclair. If you know of my father's affairs, I beg that you come to Château de Villeneuve at once. I'm in danger of being silenced." She sealed it with wax from a candle and gave it to a stable boy bound for the town post. "This must be delivered to Paris," she said. "No one must know." The boy nodded solemnly. The following day brought new whispers. The Marquis had received word from Versailles. The royal inspector would arrive within a fortnight. Élise kept her composure, serving meals, arranging flowers, nodding when spoken to. Inside, her resolve sharpened. One evening, she entered the library again, pretending to tidy the shelves. Armand was there, writing at his desk. His voice broke the silence. "You avoid me." "I follow your orders, my lord." He looked up. "That tone does not suit you. You were once gentle." "I was once deceived." He rose slowly. "You speak as though I wronged you." "You did," she said simply. His jaw tightened. "Whatever affection existed between us was folly. You must understand the world does not bend for feeling. It demands advantage." "Then I thank you," she replied, "for teaching me its rules." Their eyes met. For the first time he looked uncertain. "What is it you plan, Élise?" "Nothing you would understand." She curtsied and left before he could answer. That night, rain began to fall, tapping softly against her window. She could not sleep. Each sound of thunder felt like the echo of his words. "I do not love her. I just need her." At dawn, the household stirred. The Comtesse's carriage arrived again, gleaming through the mist. Élise watched from the upper window as the woman descended, smiling, radiant, certain of her place. The Marquise greeted her with a kiss to her hand. Élise turned away. By afternoon, Lucienne entered her chamber. "A visitor for you," she whispered, eyes wide. "He says his name is Duret." Élise's heart leapt. She hurried down to the small salon, where an elderly man waited, hat in hand. His coat was worn, his eyes kind. "Mademoiselle," he said, bowing slightly, "you sent for me." "Yes." "You knew my father?" "I did." Jacques Sinclair was a man of honor. His lands were taken unjustly by the late Marquis l'Évêque. When your father protested, he was dismissed and died in poverty. I kept his papers, hoping one day his child might claim them. "Those papers," she said urgently, "do you still have them?" He nodded. "I brought them. But tell me, why summon me here? It is dangerous." "Because the son of that same Marquis seeks to claim those lands as his own. He uses my name to do it." Duret's eyes hardened. "Then he commits fraud." "Yes," she whispered, "and I have proof." She showed him the second letter, the one bearing her father's name. He read it carefully, lips tightening. "This is damning. You must take these to the inspector when he arrives." "I will," she said, "but until then not a word to anyone." "Agreed." As he left through the servants' gate, Élise felt a strange calm settle over her. The game had changed. She was no longer the girl behind the door. She was the keeper of a truth that could undo a Marquis. That evening Armand summoned her. "You seem restless," he said. "Is my household too confining?" "I am content, my lord." "You do not look content. Perhaps that is because I see what others do not." His eyes narrowed. "And what do you see?" "The difference between what a man wants and what he deserves." He studied her, then smiled faintly. "You speak like a philosopher. Has someone been teaching you?" "Life has." He laughed softly but uneasily. "You intrigue me, Élise. Be careful. I might begin to need you again." "You already do," she said under her breath. "What was that?" "Nothing, my lord." He waved her away, yet when she left, She felt his gaze follow her to the door. 3 days later, the Marquis's mood shifted. Rumors of missing documents reached him. He summoned his steward, demanding explanations. "Find the letters concerning the St. Clair matter," he ordered. "They are missing from my desk." Élise listened from the hallway, hidden behind the drapery. The steward stammered that he had searched everywhere. Armand's voice rose slightly. "They were sealed and addressed to Duret. Someone has interfered. No word of this must reach the Comtesse." When the steward departed, Armand stood alone, staring at the empty space on the desk. Élise stepped back silently, her heart racing. He would suspect everyone soon enough. That night, she hid the original letters and Duret's papers beneath a loose tile near her bed. She slept little, listening for footsteps in the corridor. The next morning, as she carried a tray through the gallery, she heard the Comtesse's voice drifting from the drawing room. "You look troubled, Armand. Have your affairs grown complicated?" "Nothing I cannot resolve," he answered. "Be certain, I would not wish to align myself with a man under investigation." Élise paused just beyond the doorway, unseen. The Comtesse continued, "They say there is talk of forgery regarding the St. Clair estate." "Lies," the Marquis said sharply, "spread by servants who do not understand what they overhear." The Comtesse rose, her skirts whispering. "Then silence them quickly, my dear, before they ruin you." The door closed behind her, and Élise remained still, breath shallow. That evening the Marquis dined alone. The servants withdrew early. Élise entered to clear the table and found him staring into his glass of wine. He looked up. "Have you ever betrayed someone you loved?" The question startled her. "Why do you ask me that?" "Because I cannot recall whether I have loved anyone at all." "Then perhaps you have," she said quietly. "Only those who have loved wonder if they've betrayed." He studied her face. "You speak strangely tonight. I see things more clearly in the dark." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Élise, do you still believe I once loved you?" She hesitated. "I no longer believe anything you say." The silence between them stretched, filled only by the ticking of the clock. Finally he said, "You will stay for the inspection next week. I may require your assistance." "As you wish, my lord." When she reached the door, she glanced back. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. Later that night, she slipped into the library once more, searching the shelves for any clue he might have left. A small drawer in the desk yielded another letter, unfinished. It was addressed to the royal inspector himself. The words made her blood run cold. "The heir to St. Clair is under my care. She will sign the necessary papers in my presence to confirm the transfer. Her name would seal her own dispossession." She crumpled the letter and fed it to the candle flame. The paper curled, burned, vanished. Behind her a door creaked. She turned sharply. The Marquis stood in the doorway, watching the ashes fall from her hand. His voice was low, dangerous in its calm. "Why, Élise, are you burning my letters?" For a moment neither of them moved. The fire hissed softly, swallowing the last curl of paper between its flames. Élise's hand remained suspended above the hearth, the scent of smoke clinging to her skin. The Marquis's voice was calm, but the quiet beneath it carried a dangerous edge. "Why are you burning my letters?" he asked again. Her pulse raced. "They were unnecessary duplicates," she said, her tone steady. He stepped closer. "You presume to decide that for me?" "I presumed only to prevent a misunderstanding," she replied. "Some papers are better forgotten." He studied her face, eyes narrowing as if reading more than she wished to reveal. "You have changed," he murmured. "Once you trembled before me. Now you stand like a judge. I have nothing left to fear, my lord." "Everyone has something to fear." "Perhaps," she said, "but not those who have already lost everything." He moved closer still, stopping just a breath away. "You speak in riddles." "What are you hiding, Élise?" She looked straight at him. "The truth." Their gazes locked. A long silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then abruptly he turned away. "Leave," he said, "and if you value your position, do not set foot in this room again." She curtsied and walked past him without another word. As she reached the door, his voice followed softly. "You think you can outwit me, but you have no idea how this world works." She paused. "Then teach me, my lord, if you dare." He said nothing, and she left him to his thoughts. In the days that followed, tension wound itself around the chateau like an invisible cord. The Marquis grew restless, pacing corridors, summoning messengers, and sending curt notes to Paris. Élise moved quietly through it all, calm as a mirror. Her secret ally, Monsieur Duret, had written back, confirming his arrival before the inspector's visit. The papers he carried would expose everything. The Comtesse de Mirval returned again, radiant in green silk. "You seem distracted, Armand," she said over tea. "Merely business," he replied, forcing a smile. "Business does not suit your complexion," she teased. "One would think a certain girl's eyes have lost their charm." His hand tightened around the cup. "You imagine too much." "I imagine nothing," she said. "I see how she looks at you. You should dismiss her before the court learns you keep company with a servant." "I will handle my household as I please." Élise, standing in the doorway with a tray, heard every word. She stepped forward calmly. "More tea, my lord?" Armand met her gaze. For the first time she thought she saw doubt flicker there. "Yes," he said. "More tea." The Comtesse's smile was sharp. "She has spirit for one of her station." "Spirit is not a fault," Élise said, her voice quiet but steady. The Comtesse arched an eyebrow. "It becomes one when it turns to insolence." Armand set his cup down. "That will be all, Élise." She bowed and withdrew, her heart pounding. Every conversation, every look, every word now felt like a thread in the web closing around them both. That evening, as the Comtesse prepared to leave, she stopped Élise in the hall. "A word of advice, child," she said sweetly. "Do not imagine yourself indispensable. Men like the Marquis require pawns, not partners." "Thank you, madame," Élise replied. "I have learned that lesson well." The Comtesse's smile faltered, and she swept away. Later, Élise went to the chapel where she and Duret had agreed to meet in secret. The old man was already there, carrying a leather satchel. "You are certain of what you mean to do?" he asked. "I am," she said. "If the Marquis presents his claim, these documents will prove his deceit. The inspector will know the truth." "Then keep them safe," he warned, "and guard yourself. A cornered man is dangerous." "I do not fear him," she said. "Fear is not for yourself alone," Duret replied gently. "Sometimes it protects those who still have hope." She nodded and hid the satchel behind a loose stone near the altar. That night, as she crossed the darkened hall, she met the Marquis unexpectedly. He was alone, his expression grim. "You've been out late," he said. "I walked for air. In the chapel. It is the only place where people speak honestly." He stepped closer, his eyes shadowed. "You hate me now, do you?" She hesitated. "I pity you." "Pity?" he repeated with a bitter laugh. "You dare pity me?" "You had everything, my lord, name, power, chance, and you spent it on deceit. Yes, I pity you." He looked at her for a long moment. "You think yourself righteous, but if I offered you all that I have, you would take it." "I would take nothing that costs another their soul." He shook his head. "You have learned to speak like a noblewoman. Perhaps that is what frightens you," she said softly. He said nothing more, only turned and left her standing in the half-light. The next morning, a messenger arrived with royal insignia. The inspector would come within 3 days. The household moved like a stirred hive, cleaning, polishing, preparing. The Marquis remained shut in his study for hours, his temper sharp. Élise waited, watching, biding her time. When the sun fell, she found herself again in the library. She traced her fingers over the spines of books she could never read aloud in company. The door creaked, and she froze. The Marquis entered, his expression unreadable. "I told you not to come here, and I told you some orders deserve to be broken." He walked toward her slowly. "Why do you stay, Élise? You could have gone, yet you linger. Is it vengeance that keeps you?" "Truth," she said. "You built your life on lies. Someone must hold a mirror to it." He stopped before her. "Be careful with mirrors. They break easily." "Then let it break," she said, meeting his gaze. "At least we would see the cracks clearly." He reached for her arm, but his hand dropped before touching her. "You do not understand what you invite. If the Comtesse withdraws her favor, if the court learns of this scandal, I lose everything. Then tell the truth before someone else does." He turned away, voice low. "It is too late." "No," she said. "It is just late enough." He looked back at her, startled by the calm in her voice. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "If you destroy me, what will you become?" "Free," she answered. 2 nights later, the chateau filled with guests for the inspector's arrival. Candles burned in every hall, and the air hummed with tension. Élise moved through the crowd unnoticed, carrying wine, serving, listening. The Marquis stood near the grand staircase, speaking with officials. His smile looked practiced, his eyes restless. The inspector, a dignified man in grey, arrived shortly before midnight. "My Lord Marquis," he said, bowing slightly, "I come to resolve the matter of the St. Clair inheritance." "Of course," Armand replied smoothly. "Shall we discuss it in private?" They disappeared into the study. Élise waited outside, her heart beating hard. Moments later she heard raised voices within. "This signature," the inspector was saying, "belongs to a woman, Élise St. Clair. I would meet her before proceeding." "She is under my protection," Armand replied quickly. "A young woman unaccustomed to official matters." "Even so," said the inspector, "her confirmation is necessary." A pause followed. Then Armand's voice, lower, urgent. "You will have it. Tomorrow." When they emerged, the inspector bowed politely. "I shall return at noon." As the guests dispersed, Élise slipped away to the chapel. Duret waited, concern etched in his face. "He will demand your signature," he said. "Then he will have my words instead," she replied. "Do you trust the inspector?" "I trust the truth." The next morning came grey and cool. The household assembled in the grand hall. The inspector arrived precisely at noon, his clerk carrying documents. The Marquise stood tall beside the fireplace, outwardly calm. Élise entered quietly, her presence drawing murmurs among the staff. "Ah," said the inspector, "this must be Mademoiselle St. Clair." Armand inclined his head. "Indeed. Then you confirm," the inspector asked Élise, "that you reside under the Marquis's care and authorize the transfer of your late father's holdings to his name?" Élise looked at Armand. His expression was unreadable, but a faint warning glimmered in his eyes. She turned back to the inspector. "No," she said clearly, "I do not." A stunned silence fell. Armand's voice cut through it. "She is confused. She does not understand." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "My father's lands were stolen once. I will not see them stolen again." The inspector frowned. "Do you have proof of your claim?" "Yes." She gestured to Duret, who stepped forward and handed him the satchel of papers. "These are my father's documents, signed and sealed. The Marquis sought to use my name to legitimize his fraud." Gasps rippled through the room. The inspector examined the papers, his expression grave. "This is serious, my lord." Armand's composure faltered. "You would believe the word of a servant over mine?" "I believe the evidence," said the inspector. "It appears, my lord, that the estate belongs by right to Mademoiselle St. Clair." Armand said nothing. His face had gone pale. The inspector turned to Élise. "You are a brave young woman. The court will see justice done. I will deliver these documents to Versailles at once." When he left, the hall emptied slowly. The Marquis remained where he was, staring into the dying fire. Élise stood across from him, waiting. At last he spoke, his voice quiet. "You have destroyed me." "No," she said. "You destroyed yourself." He looked up at her, eyes hollow. "And what will you do now, my Lady of St. Clair?" "I will rebuild what you broke." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Do you think they will accept you? You, a servant, suddenly an heiress? They will have no choice. Truth carries its own authority." He turned away. "You think you've won." "There is no victory in ruin," she said. "Only an end." He was silent a long while, then very softly, "I never meant to harm you." "You meant to use me," she replied. "And that is worse." He closed his eyes. "Perhaps. But what will you do when you realize that you cannot live without hating me?" "I will forgive myself," she said, and walked away. That night, rain began again, washing the dust from the courtyards. Élise stood by the window of her chamber, watching the water run down the glass. The chateau felt hollow, as if stripped of its vanity. A knock came at her door. She opened it to find Armand there, drenched from the storm. "May I speak?" he asked quietly. "You should not be here." "I have nowhere else." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered, his clothes soaked, his expression weary. "You have what you wanted. The estate, your name, your vengeance. I am finished." "I never wanted your ruin," she said. "Then what did you want?" "The truth." He gave a faint, broken smile. "You have it. And what comfort does it give you?" "Enough to begin again." He sank into the chair by the fire. "You are stronger than I thought." "No," she said, "only less blind." He looked into the flames, then at her. "If I told you I once loved you, would you believe me? I would ask which part of me you loved. The woman or the name?" "Both," he whispered, though I understood neither. She turned away. "Then perhaps now you will learn." He rose slowly. "And if I asked your forgiveness?" She met his gaze. "I would tell you that forgiveness is not given, it is earned." He nodded once, the faintest shadow of humility in his eyes. "Then I will earn it, if I can." She said nothing more. He left her chamber without another word, his footsteps fading down the corridor. The next morning, word spread that the Comtesse de Mirval had withdrawn her favor and that the Marquis's petition to the crown was void. Servants whispered of debts and disgrace, of a man stripped of privilege. Élise listened in silence. By nightfall, he was gone from the chateau. No farewell, no letter, only absence. Yet as she walked through the empty hall, she felt no triumph, only a strange stillness like breath before confession. At the end of the corridor, she found his ring lying on the table where he had once signed his letters. It glimmered faintly in the candlelight, heavy with silence. She picked it up, held it in her palm and whispered, "Then let the game be over." But even as she spoke, a servant ran toward her breathlessly. "Mademoiselle, he has returned. The Marquis is here again." Élise stood frozen, the ring cold in her hand. The servant's voice trembled. "He has returned, mademoiselle. The Marquis came through the storm not an hour ago." Her breath caught. "Where is he now?" "In the library," the servant whispered. "He sent the others away. No one dares go near." Élise dismissed him with a nod. When the corridor emptied, she looked again at the ring, its crest dull in the candlelight. For days she had imagined what she might say if she ever saw him again. Anger had turned to silence, silence to confusion. And now he was here uninvited, unrepentant, or perhaps something else entirely. The air in the library was thick with the scent of damp wool and extinguished candles. Armand stood by the hearth, his cloak dark with rain. He looked older, as though the weeks apart had carved new lines across his face. When he heard her steps, he turned. "You should not have come back," she said quietly. "Perhaps not," he answered, "but I could not stay away. You left without a word. I had no words left to give." She kept her distance. "What do you want, my lord?" He gave a faint smile. "To see you once more before I vanish completely." "You already vanished," she said. "That night in the ballroom when you spoke those words behind the door, everything after was only noise." He bowed his head slightly. "I know. I have replayed that night 1,000 times. And in all those times, did you regret it?" "Yes," he said simply, "though regret changes nothing." She crossed her arms. "Why return now? The court will have nothing to do with you. The Comtesse has turned her back. The inspector has exposed your fraud. What more could you lose here?" He looked up, his eyes weary. "Everything I still value. I have nothing left that belongs to you." He took a hesitant step forward. "You have yourself, and that is what I once desired most and deserved least." "Spare me your poetry," she said, her voice low. "It comes too late." He sighed. "Then allow me truth instead. I came because I cannot carry the weight of what I've done. I thought ambition would save me, that power could silence my fear. But it was fear that built every wall I hid behind. You tore them down without mercy." "I did not mean to destroy you," she murmured. "But you did," he said gently, "and thank heaven for it." She studied him. "You sound like a man rehearsing repentance." "Perhaps," he admitted, "but I am done pretending to be anything else." She turned away, uncertain. "You expect forgiveness?" "No," he said, "only understanding. The rest I must earn." The rain outside softened to a whisper. She moved toward the window, watching droplets trace the glass. "You can never undo what was done, Armand. My father died believing his name disgraced. You turned his daughter into a tool for your advancement." "I know," his voice faltered, "and I would give everything I have left to change that. But you cannot." "No," he said. "I can only offer what remains of me." She faced him again, her eyes bright with conflict. "And what is that worth?" "That is for you to decide." He reached into his coat and drew out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I found these among my father's papers," he said. "They are your father's letters, every one of them. I kept them hidden once, thinking they might serve my interests. They serve only yours." She took the bundle hesitantly, unwrapping the twine. Inside were faded pages, her father's handwriting unmistakable. Her throat tightened. "I should burn them," she whispered. "Or keep them," he said. "Whatever brings you peace." She closed the bundle carefully. "Why give them now?" "Because I owe you the truth, even if it condemns me." For a long moment they said nothing. The fire crackled, casting shifting light across the room. Finally she spoke. "You said once that you needed me. That was the last honest thing you ever said." He nodded slowly. "And it is still true. Only I did not understand what need meant. I thought it was ownership. It was dependence. Now I know it is simply love stripped of vanity." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Love? After all this?" He met her gaze steadily. "Yes. Not the kind I offered before. This is humbler, quieter, the kind that asks for nothing." She looked down at her hands. "You expect me to believe that?" "No," he said softly. "I expect you to feel it when you are ready." The quiet stretched again, broken only by the sound of rain. At last she said, "You should go. The scandal cannot fade while you remain here." "I have nowhere else," he replied. "I sold my townhouse in Paris. My accounts are frozen. The chateau will soon belong to the crown. When they come for it, they will find me gone. Gone where? I do not know." She looked at him for a long time, then turned away. "Leave before dawn. Take the road to Lyon. No one will follow." He hesitated. "Will you not even bid me farewell?" She shook her head. "Not yet." He inclined his head. "Then I will obey this one command at least." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Élise," he said quietly, "when you think of me, do not remember the man who lied. Remember the one who learned too late." She said nothing, and he left her standing in the half-light of the library. Morning came grey and cold. Élise sat at her desk, unable to read the letters he had returned. Outside, horses' hooves sounded faintly on the gravel. She crossed to the window and saw him below, dressed plainly, his cloak fastened, a single trunk at his feet. He glanced up once as if he felt her gaze, but she did not move. After a moment he mounted and rode through the gates without looking back. For hours she remained still. The house felt empty, hollowed by his absence. Yet beneath the ache there was a strange relief, a silence that did not wound. That evening Monsieur Duret called at her request. "The chateau is yours now," he said kindly. "The court has ruled in your favor. What will you do with it?" "Open it again," she said. "Not as a house of titles, but of work. My father would not have wished for wealth without purpose." "Wise words," Duret said. "And the Marquis?" "He is gone. Then peace will return." She smiled faintly. "Peace is never quiet, monsieur. It moves like the tide." The weeks passed. The estate grew calmer. The servants who had once whispered against her began to speak her name with respect. Children from nearby villages came to learn letters in the old ballroom, now turned into a school. Yet at night, when the corridors fell silent, she still thought of him. The way his voice had softened at the end, the way he had looked at her not as possession, but as prayer. She told herself it was pity, nothing more. Still, the memory lingered. One morning in early spring, as she walked through the garden, a messenger arrived carrying a sealed letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. She opened it beneath the shade of a flowering tree. "Élise," it began. "I write from Provence. The air here is clean, the days simple. I earn my living now as a clerk, ironic perhaps considering what I once took from a clerk's daughter. I think of you daily, but not with despair. I remember your strength as one remembers light, not for its warmth, but for its clarity. I ask for nothing, not even forgiveness, only that you know the man who spoke behind that door is dead, and the one who remains owes his soul to your courage. If ever you need me, send word to the inn at Saint-Remy. I shall come." He had signed it simply, Armand. Élise folded the letter slowly. The garden seemed to blur around her. She slipped it into her pocket and walked back toward the house. That night she sat by the window, watching the stars rise above the orchard. The letter lay on her desk beside the bundle of her father's papers. She whispered, "He has learned what love costs. So have I." Spring deepened into summer. The school prospered. The estate thrived. She laughed more easily, spoke with confidence. Yet sometimes, in quiet moments, she would touch the ring he had left behind and wonder if redemption was ever complete, or if love, once awakened, ever truly slept again. One afternoon, while she oversaw the children's lessons, Lucienne entered with a startled expression. "A gentleman is here to see you, mademoiselle." Élise looked up from her work. "A gentleman?" "He would not give his name, but he waits in the garden." Her heart gave a slow, unsteady beat. She rose, smoothed her gown, and walked outside. Under the same tree where she had read his letter months before, Armand stood. His clothes were plain, his face tanned by southern sun, but his posture was humble. He bowed slightly when he saw her. "You received my letter," he said. "I did." "And you did not reply." "I had nothing to say." "Then allow me to speak now," he said. "I heard of what you've built here. The school, the workers' cottages. You have done what I never could. Turned power into kindness." She regarded him calmly. "You did not come to flatter me." "No," he said. "I came because I cannot undo the past, but I wish to be part of what you are building, if you will allow it. I have skills, knowledge of management, law. Perhaps they can serve something honest for once." She hesitated. "You would work under me?" "I would work beside you," he said quietly. "As an equal. Or not at all." She searched his face for deception and found none. "And if I refuse?" "Then I will wish you happiness and leave again," he said, "but I will not ask twice." The air between them felt alive with something that was neither the past nor quite forgiveness. At last she said, "Stay then, but you will begin as any other clerk. No privileges, no title." He smiled faintly. "I expect none." Days turned into weeks. Armand kept his word. He worked tirelessly, never overstepping, never presuming. The villagers grew to respect him, though few knew who he truly was. Élise watched from a distance, wary at first, then with quiet wonder, as he carried out her plans with diligence and humility. One evening, as they reviewed accounts together, she looked up from the papers. "Why do you endure this?" she asked. "You who once commanded everything." He glanced at her. "Because peace is not given. It is earned, like forgiveness." She lowered her eyes to the ledger. "Perhaps." The candle burned low between them. Silence settled, soft and almost tender. Weeks later, on a warm autumn night, the villagers held a festival in the orchard. Music floated through the air, laughter mingled with the scent of apples and firelight. Élise stood beneath the lanterns watching the children dance. Armand approached quietly. "You have given them joy," he said. "We have," she corrected. He smiled. "Then I am forgiven?" She looked at him. "Forgiveness cannot be asked. It must be lived." "I have tried." "I know." The music swelled. For the first time in years, she reached out her hand. "Then dance with me." He hesitated only a moment before taking it. They moved slowly beneath the lanterns, two figures who had once been enemies, bound now by something gentler than pride and stronger than regret. As the final notes faded, he whispered, "Élise, I do not deserve this moment. No one ever does," she said. He looked at her then, not as a man seeking pardon, but as one finally at peace. The night deepened, filled with quiet laughter and the promise of something new. And when their hands parted, it was not with sorrow, but with certainty that what had begun in deceit had turned at last into truth. Winter returned quietly that year, soft as breath over the hills. The orchards of Villeneuve slept beneath pale frost, and the chateau, once a place of intrigue and deceit, had grown peaceful. Firelight glowed in every window. Laughter came from the schoolrooms where children rehearsed songs for the feast of St. Martin. The scent of pine and bread filled the halls, and Élise moved among her people with the calm assurance of one who had earned every smile that followed her. Armand was in the courtyard, helping two boys lift a heavy crate of books from a wagon. His coat was dusted with snow, his hair damp from the cold, but he laughed easily now without the weight that had once shadowed him. When Élise appeared at the steps, the boys straightened at once. "Inside with you," she said warmly. "The wind will steal your voices before you can sing." They ran off, and Armand turned to her, his breath misting in the air. "You command them better than any general," he said. "They obey because I do not ask what I would not do myself." He smiled. "That is precisely why they love you." "And what of you?" she asked lightly. Do you obey my orders as faithfully?" He looked at her, that same quiet reverence in his eyes that had replaced his old arrogance. "Without question," he said, "though you no longer give commands, only reasons to stay." The wind rose between them, carrying flakes that caught in her hair. For a heartbeat, he wanted to reach out, to brush them away, but he didn't move. Months of patience had taught him restraint, and love, he had learned, could live without possession. She turned toward the door. "Come in before you freeze." He followed her to the hall, where the great hearth blazed. The room smelled of cedar and apples. On the table lay the ledgers they had worked on together, now closed. It was the first winter since the crown had restored the estate to her name, and the accounts were balanced. The debts were gone. "You have done well," he said quietly. "We have done well," she corrected. "You have been as constant as the fire in this hearth." "Perhaps," he said. "But a hearth needs a home to burn within." She glanced at him, her smile small but certain. "Then we have both found what we lacked." That evening the villagers gathered for the winter celebration. Lanterns lined the paths, their light flickering against snow. The old ballroom, once witness to betrayal, now brimmed with warmth and laughter. Long tables stretched across the floor, filled with bread, fruit, and wine. Children played at the edges, while musicians tuned their violins near the dais. Armand entered quietly, content to stand at the back. Élise greeted each guest with a word or a touch on the hand. When she saw him, she hesitated, then crossed the room to where he stood. "You should join them," she said, "and disturb your triumph." "It is not my triumph," she replied. "It is ours." He inclined his head. "Then allow me to witness it from where I belong." She frowned slightly. "And where is that?" "Wherever you are happiest," he said. Before she could answer, the village priest appeared beside them. "Mademoiselle Saint-Clair," he said with a bow. "The children are ready for their song." "Then let them sing," she said, and took a step toward the dais. But the priest hesitated, glancing at Armand. "And you, my lord? Will you not sing too?" Armand smiled faintly. "I have no voice left for hymns, father, only for apologies." The priest chuckled. "Then make them sound like prayers, and heaven will not know the difference." As the children began to sing, Élise turned her gaze on Armand. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the music fell away. There was something unspoken between them, something that had grown not from grand gestures, but from months of labor, humility, and forgiveness. When the song ended, applause filled the room. Élise raised her hand and the hall fell silent. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate more than winter's passing. We celebrate the rebuilding of this home, not by one, but by many. The Château de Villeneuve stands, because we learned to begin again." Her voice wavered slightly, but her eyes never left Armand. "And sometimes," she added, "what begins in sorrow may end in peace." The villagers cheered, and the music began again. The tables were cleared for dancing. Élise turned to leave the dais, but the crowd parted, and Armand stood before her, his hand outstretched. "Will you grant me a dance, mademoiselle?" he asked softly. She hesitated only a breath. "If you remember the steps." "I remember nothing else." He led her to the center of the room. The violinist caught their glance and changed the tune, a slow waltz, tender and old. As the melody rose, Armand placed one hand lightly at her waist, the other holding hers. They began to move, steady and unhurried, the crowd fading until only the two of them seemed to exist. "Do you recall our first dance?" he murmured. "How could I forget? You looked at me then with trust," he said, "a trust I did not deserve." "You have earned it now," she said. His grip tightened slightly, as though to make sure she was real. "Then say it, Élise. Tell me I have earned it." "You have," she whispered. The music swelled. They turned, their shadows sweeping across the marble floor, past mirrors that had once reflected deceit and now held only light. The final note hung in the air, and when silence fell, Armand released her hand slowly, as though afraid to wake from a dream. The crowd applauded, but Élise did not hear them. Her gaze lingered on him, steady and unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. The priest approached, still smiling from the corner of the room. "A fine dance," he said, "and perhaps an omen, if I may be so bold." Armand inclined his head. "You always did have a sense for timing, father." "Then, let me not waste it," the priest replied. If two souls have mended what pride once broke, should they not bless that miracle before the year ends? The room quieted, the laughter fading into expectancy. Élise felt her pulse quicken. "Father," she began, but he raised a hand. "Child, do not fear your own happiness," he said gently. "I have seen the way you look at this man. It is not caution I see now, it is peace." Armand stepped closer, his voice low. "He is right, Élise. We have spent enough time in silence. Let it end tonight." She looked around the hall, the faces of her people, the glow of candles, the warmth that filled the air, and then back at him. "Very well," she said softly, "but not as the Marquis and the servant. As Armand and Élise." The priest nodded and lifted his hands for quiet. "Then by the grace of heaven and the witness of all who stand here, let this house be joined not by title or wealth, but by love freely given." The words fell like sunlight through the air. Armand took Élise's hand, his eyes bright. "I once said I did not love you, that I only needed you," he said. "I was blind. I love you because I need nothing else." A murmur passed through the crowd. Élise's eyes filled with tears, though her voice remained steady. "And I," she said, "love you not for what you were, but for who you have become." The priest smiled. "Then seal it as the world has always done." Armand hesitated only a moment before drawing her close. Their lips met, softly first, then with the certainty of two hearts that had already survived everything else. The hall erupted in applause and cheers. The children clapped, the musicians struck a joyful tune, and the villagers began to dance around them. Armand whispered against her ear, "So ends our story of ruin." "No," she said, smiling through tears, "so begins our story of grace." The feast lasted long into the night. Laughter echoed through corridors that had once carried only whispers. The guests toasted to renewal, to love, to the strange justice of life. When at last the last candle guttered low and the last song was sung, Élise and Armand walked together through the quiet gardens, their breath visible in the cold air. "Do you remember the first night we met?" she asked. "I remember thinking I could never deserve the way you looked at me," he said. "And now? Now I only pray I never lose it again." They stopped beside the frozen fountain. The moonlight touched the water's edge, turning ice to silver. She shivered, and he removed his cloak, wrapping it around her shoulders. "You will catch cold," she said. "I have been colder without you." She looked up at him, laughter trembling on her lips. "You have learned the art of sincerity." It was the only lesson worth learning. They stood in silence, the night vast around them. From the chateau came faint music, someone playing a final tune before sleep. Armand reached for her hand. "Élise," he said quietly, "I wish to rebuild more than this house. I wish to rebuild a life. With you." "You already have," she replied. "Then allow me to give it a name." She tilted her head. "And what name is that?" "Marriage," he said simply. Her heart caught. "You would risk scandal again." "There is no scandal in truth," he said. "Let them say what they will. I have spent enough years hiding behind pride. I would rather live openly by love." She searched his face. "And if the court refuses to recognize it, then let the court watch us be happy without its blessing." The sincerity in his eyes left her breathless. "Armand," she whispered, "I once swore I would never belong to any man again." "Then do not belong," he said. "Stand beside me instead." The snow began to fall again, soft and endless. She looked up at him, her smile trembling, and then nodded. "Yes." He exhaled as though releasing years of guilt. "You have given me back my name, my honor, and my heart. I have nothing left but to spend them all on you." "Then spend them wisely," she said. "I will." The wind carried their laughter across the gardens. The following morning, before the chapel altar that had once witnessed her vows of defiance, Élise stood in a gown of simple white wool, her hair braided with ribbons. Armand waited beside her, dressed plainly, his hands steady. The priest spoke softly, the congregation small, servants, children, and villagers who had become their family. When the vows were spoken, there were no tears, only quiet smiles. "Do you take her, not as a prize, but as your equal?" asked the priest. "I do," Armand said. "And do you take him, not as your redeemer, but as your companion?" "I do," Élise replied. When their hands met, the church bells rang, clear and bright through the morning air. Outside, The snow melted in sudden sunlight. The people cheered as they stepped into the courtyard, no longer the fallen Marquis and the servant girl, but two souls who had met at the edge of ruin and chosen mercy instead. Armand turned to her, his eyes full of wonder. "You have changed everything I thought I knew of love," she smiled. "It was never yours to command. It was always ours to learn." He drew her close and kissed her once more, the world around them fading to silence. The Château de Villeneuve stood bright behind them, alive again, not with pride but with laughter and forgiveness. And in that moment, beneath the wide winter sky, Élise knew their story had finally found its peace, for what began with deceit had ended in truth, and love had come home at last. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.